Hey, Gary Bird here with Dental Marketing Theory. Got an exciting podcast for you today. Kelley with Dental HR Consultant. She came on today and shared some awesome tips. Several topics that we discussed. Number one, how to deal with artificial inflation in dentistry. We're seeing this in all of the pay going up and how that's going to impact your team and what you're going to need to do to set yourself up for the future. Also, dentistry benefits compared to other industries and who we're competing against and how to get better in that area. And then also attracting and retaining the best team members, how to make sure that you not only get these people in your door, but keep them for the long term. Stay tuned. All right, we're live. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks so much for coming on. We're excited to talk to you. So first thing I wanted to jump into, it's probably the most important thing, is I wanted to talk to you about your deadlift.
Which one? Yesterday's?
Yeah. So what did you hit yesterday?
I did 255 unbelted.
That is really good.
Thank you.
That is good. Is that PR?
For unbelted. My belted PR right now is 265 and I'm trying to move that up 10 pounds. My ultimate goal is 300.
You're right there. You're right there.
I'm getting close.
What did you get stronger or weaker over COVID? How did that work?
A little bit stronger, actually. My gym opened up as soon as possible and we're in Texas, so that was like May of last year. So I went while I was masked just so that I could continue to work out because I really love doing it. It's great for me and great for my mental health and great for my clients for me to be in good mental health. So I wanted to make sure that I could continue. And I did it as safe as possible. I masked, I stayed away from everybody. I sanitized all the things. And so I ended up getting stronger.
That's awesome. Yeah. Deadlifting is my favorite, weighted exercise.
I love it.
That's yours too? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's fun. And you can I feel like you can keep improving. There's other stuff that I do that I kind of plateau and I have a really struggle to move up in weight, but deadlift is something that I can kind of go backwards and then forward and backwards. And
yeah,
it's really overall beneficial to your health, I think.
I agree.
That's awesome. And then the other thing is you're into coffee. So like I was looking through your social media and prepping for our podcast today, and almost every post is every other post, I would say, you're either cooking or you are...
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I got mine too. Free advertisement. So tell me a little bit about that. You drink your coffee cold?
Usually, I live in Texas and we're at like 80 plus degrees year round. So I know you can drink hot coffee when it's hot. I just don't prefer it. I like it cold and black until it gets like actually cold enough to have hot beverages, and then I'll switch.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love coffee too. I drink it. I do pour overs. I do espresso and I do cold brew. So
I'll take all of it.
And cooking too. You're passionate about cooking too, right?
I am. I do love to cook. I'm doing Whole30 right now, so I'll be cooking a lot and ordering out none, hopefully.
What is it? You said doing what, 30?
Whole30. It's kind of a reset where you cut out a whole lot of inflammatory foods. And I've done it a couple of times. I did one in January and it was great. And I felt great. And I've been kind of lazy about ordering in lately. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to do another round of Whole30.
So what is it? What is it like? What do you start cutting out?
Oh, well, all the things that are good for you, or at least good to eat anyway. Alcohol, which I don't drink, but most people, that's the biggest problematic problem. Anything wheat, any grains, including corn, you cut out legumes, you cut out dairy, soy, and sugar.
Wow. So dairy and sugar. And then what was the other big one?
Soy. Which is in everything.
Yeah. So what are you going to eat? Like, what would you end up eating then?
Oh, everything I would normally cook anyways. I'm going to do a vegetarian curry stew this evening. What did I do? I did a salmon with a cauliflower puree and green beans the other day of, lots of veggies. My favorite's a skillet meal that has sweet potatoes and Brussels sprouts and some ground turkey. And I can usually do that with either a Whole30 approved bacon or I put some kind of Asian flavors in it and do some red pepper flakes and some coconut aminos. And that's one of my favorite things for lunch.
That's awesome. So do you feel better at the end of it? Is it like...
Yes. It's one of those things I probably should do more throughout the year. But it does, part of it really helps me get back in the kitchen and actually cook and, connect with those whole foods rather than hitting that DoorDash app all too frequently.
Yes, I know how that is. The ease of use, right? You can just click a button.
It's right there on my phone and food shows up at my door. How much better can it get?
Literally, yes. That's something good that came out of COVID is lots of online food options. Almost everybody delivers now.
Yes.
So something if people don't know you, you're like the HR queen. Yeah, I mean, you are. I was watching you. I was doing my research for this podcast, and you and I talked about it. You did during COVID. You did 40 podcasts around HR. Is that right?
Something around there. Yes, around FFCRA mostly. But then also,
Mm-hmm.
what do you do if your team gets COVID, that kind of thing.
Got it. And then, so did you walk me through a little bit of your process, how you got into HR, specifically into dental, and just that span of jumping into the field?
So I actually got into HR when I was going for a marketing degree. I took my first HR class as a general business credit and just fell in love with it and immediately switched my major and decided I wanted to do that instead. And I, at the time, was self-employed as a licensed massage therapist here in Texas, and I had my own private practice doing clinical work. So I decided my last year of school that I needed to go work somewhere to, be employed by somebody so that I could go get hired as an HR assistant or a coordinator and work my way up some corporate HR ladder. And none of that happened. I actually got hired by a dental CPA firm and started out kind of doing some marketing work for them. But then as I got closer to finishing my degree, I started actually sitting in on some client meetings and I was able to answer some questions. And it turns out that my knowledge skills on that side of things filled in a lot of gaps where accounting kind of leaves off. They talk about paying people in the sense of how to pay people, but not what you should be paying people and so on and so forth. And so it really just kind of stuck there, and I stayed there for almost 8 years, but 7.5 years, and
Wow.
Decided to start my own firm about the end of 2019, and had people ask, you could work with anybody or HR, you could do any industry. I'm like, yeah, I could, but I love working with dentists. I really do. Kind of developed myself a little niche there, and quite honestly, they're my people. Yeah. a lot of type A, neurotic overthinkers. It's just awesome.
That's awesome. So into 2019, you decided to start a business right before COVID.
Yes, of course. Why not?
So walk me through that. So you start a business, it's into 2019. You're like, hey, I'm going to do HR for dental. Mm-hmm. And then what kind of unraveled behind that?
Well, I had originally started in 2019 just to provide the educational side. At the CPA firm, we had developed some practice finance curriculum, and we had delivered that to TAGD and part of their business track program. And whenever we were looking at putting that course online, we had discussed the possibility of putting some HR content on there. And I said, well, people don't go to a CPA firm to learn about HR. So if I were going to do that and develop it all myself, I kind of want it to be my baby with my branding and my company. And so I started my LLC for that, separated from the firm in February. And then we all know what happened in March. So my intent to just be a educational firm, all of a sudden I got thrown back into being a consultant and did a complete 360 overnight. Basically, that was my pivot.
Yeah. So that's a hard pivot.
Kind of a little bit. I actually had one of these webinars that I started doing. I ended up getting my first client off of, and they were like, yeah, we want you to come into our office and, work with our team and help us figure all this out. And how do we do that? I'm like, well, I need to send you an engagement letter. Can I get that to you on like Monday? Because I don't have one. So I spent the weekend creating one so I could get started.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then, and one of the parts that was fascinating to me, and I see it on the flip side of the coin with marketing, where you get to learn a subject so well that you can kind of look at things and go, whoa, look at all these holes right here. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing with marketing is if you get it wrong, it's okay, right? Like you're going to be able to rebound and recover. But sometimes with HR, you're kind of, it can be a little bit risky. And I know you're not a lawyer.
It can be a little expensive to get it wrong.
Yeah, it can be very, very expensive. And so walk me through kind of who uses not just your services, but who needs those kind of services and where you're seeing the biggest need right now.
Employment laws apply whether you have one employee, 100 or 1,000. So as soon as you start hiring a team, you need HR, or at least you need somebody to help you manage your HR. A lot of practices are smaller, of course, in dentistry. You deal with practices that have less than 20 employees, most of them less than 10, actually. And so the doctor or the office manager or the spouse of the doctor or somebody ends up being that go-to person, and they don't typically have a lot of HR training. There are some resources out there for them, but unless you're doing this day in, day out constantly, a lot of situations end up coming up that you don't know how to handle and don't know where to go to look for the information. So that's usually where I end up filling in the gap.
Got it. And is there a certain size company that needs it more than others, or is it just kind of universal that people need support, or what are you seeing?
The more people you have, the more problems you have usually. So, I mean, there isn't a specific size. I generally deal with practices that have less than about 30 or so employees. However, I do have a couple of corporate DSO size practices that still need my services, not to actually do their hands-on day-to-day HR, and not even to solve all of their employee problems, but to come up with, some of those unique off the cuff type situations, or just to be somebody that their HR manager can bounce ideas off of. My job is to make their HR people look good. So I'm there for that.
Yeah. So there's a gap, right? There's a dental knowledge gap that you see in the industry, and you're trying to fill that. What are the biggest glaring holes that you're seeing on the bigger level of, you're consulting with bigger firms, or DSOs, I should say? What gaps are you seeing in the normal HR model for dental?
Normally it falls into categories of paying people benefits. That tends to be problematic. And then there's just this huge gap of people thinking things are legal when they're not, or thinking things are not legal that are, and they just don't know, or they don't understand certain terms. For example, one that's recently come up in some of the Facebook groups are the terms at will and right to work, which don't mean what people think they mean. I'll hear a practice owner say, "Oh, these people are at will, my team's at will, and so I can do whatever I want." Yeah, that's not really true. Or somebody says, "Well, this is a right to work state." Yeah, but that has something to do with unions and nothing to do with whatever they're talking about for the most part. So there's a lot of misinformation out there.
So give me some of the, I know you gave me a couple of those, but could you give me some examples of like where, and they don't have to be real, but just some things that you're seeing, that walking through those examples, what happens when you're misrepresenting that information?
Well, if you seem to think that you actually can do whatever you want and you terminate somebody and it's for them having a disability or for a discriminatory reason, you can end up with a suit from the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, to come in. If you're thinking that you can pay people exempt versus non-exempt, for example, thinking you can pay them salary when they're not actually qualified to be an exempt employee, and you're not paying overtime and you're not clocking their time, and you get audited by the Department of Labor in Texas, that can be a problem. TWC can come in and audit. That can be a problem. If you're misclassifying associates as 1099 contractors when they should be W-2, you can get a misclassification audit by the IRS at random or reported, depending on how it goes. And all of these things I have had happen to clients.
Got it. And what you said something that you said in Texas. So we're a virtual company, SMC is, and we have all these different laws in different states. And so we have to do this over here and this over here, and really think about each state. How are DSOs navigating that space? Have you had some experience with that, and what does that look like?
Hopefully they have somebody in legal that is familiar with the states that they're operating in, because not only are you going to have different rules as far as paying them, who has a state tax withholding, or potentially contractor rules can vary from state to state. But then also there's a lot of even local laws in some states in terms of sick leave or paid time off, in terms of whether or not you can conduct background checks, at what point in the hiring process you can conduct background checks, things like that you really need to have somebody who knows what they're doing, because HR is a lot more than just payroll. You're not just running payrolls. You're not just administering benefits or writing people up. You really need to pay attention to what you're required to do on your state and local levels, as well as at the federal level.
Definitely. And then something that you had an interesting take on was, this is something that I'm hearing a lot, is okay, well, September is going to roll around and everybody's going to stop collecting benefits. And everything's going to just kind of go, this labor shortage is going away. What's your take on that?
I think that is wishful thinking. I know there's been a mass exodus of team members in dentistry. I think over the last year or so that a lot of people, especially at the pay levels of hygiene and dental assistants, they've realized that there are other jobs that they can do that offer more flexible hours, that they can work from home or remotely, somewhere else if they want to work. And so people are starting to leave. Not just the front desk people, but also, you have a pretty significant number of hygienists who have retired out either because they were due to retire or they retired early, not wanting to deal with COVID, the risk that carried. And then you also have a group of students from hygiene and dental schools and even associates, I suppose, from the last year that didn't get to graduate on time potentially. Yeah. Because COVID shut everything down. They didn't get their last classes done. And so you're kind of facing a shortage overall. And I don't think that's just magically going to solve itself. I don't think your $45 an hour hygienists are sitting at home collecting unemployment at the couple $100 it is. Even with the additional unemployment, they still make more when they're working. So I really feel like that's wishful thinking.
Yeah. So you feel like September's going to hit and maybe there's a little bit of a bump, but it's not going to solve the shortage that we're facing, right?
No, I really don't think so.
Yeah. And then I'm the more and more I look at it, I tend to agree with you. And then, so, and you brought up something interesting the last time we talked. You talked about how, so like, let's just use hygienists as an example. So hygienists' salaries are going up. Everybody's salaries are going up. Inflation is a real thing, and a shortage of workforce drives that up. What's going to happen with that? Like, what do you see coming down the road that's going to cause?
I feel like that's going to end up being what I'm calling artificial inflation, where yes, the supply is low. So, they're able to demand higher wages. However, at some point that'll settle itself back out. And then are you going to continue paying that hygienist $50, $60 an hour? Right now, even if you've got hygienists that are asking for what's close to what essentially your associates are making per hour when you break down their daily rate, I think that's going to be a problem where they're going to end up pricing themselves out of a job in some areas, not all areas. There's not everywhere up to like $60 an hour, but there's some that we're kind of getting close to that pre-pandemic anyway.
Yeah.
So I think it just kind of depends on where you're at in the industry, but I feel like everybody's going to have to look further ahead than just right now. I know it's hard to hire right now. And I know, offering $10,000 hiring bonuses and paying, $5 more an hour for a dental assistant than you would have before might get you somebody now, but is that going to cause problems with your current team who aren't making that and they've been with you longer than this new person who just came in and is making more than they are? But then also in the future, in the next couple of years, as some of this settles itself out, are you going to reduce wages? No, probably not. So how are you going to manage that whenever you've done the Band-Aid approach to paying higher wages right now to get somebody because you need them?
Now, so what's your prediction? So I know you don't have a crystal ball and we don't know for sure, right? But so let's assume, inflation comes, salaries go up, and then it kind of things go back to quotation mark normal, right? How does that adjust in the market? How do you see that adjusting in the dental market?
I think that's a hard question to really answer. And I'm not an economic expert as well. I just kind of going based on what I've seen. I really think that people are going to end up having to figure out other solutions. They're going to end up outsourcing their insurance because they can't get enough front desk people. They're going to end up trying to work with less assistants, which is unfortunate because that creates less jobs. They're going to end up having their incoming associates do more hygiene. Or they're going to have a lot more part-timers. And that's been a solution that I've had to suggest lately that I really don't like suggesting, because if you need full-time hours, you should hire a full-time employee. But right now, you don't know. You don't know. People may be looking for part-time work or more flexible work so that they can stay home with the kids because schools are still, closing or I say still closing. Thought they were going to open back up and are closing again.
Yeah.
In some areas. So that may actually be part of your solution is hiring more people to do less hours throughout the week.
Yeah. So, and I know that that's something that's big. And like, I've seen this in a couple markets for hygiene. The hygienist is having more flexible schedules.
Yep.
And having more, part-time people that are going to fill that position. So you just think that everybody's going to adjust a little bit. So every sector that you can adjust 10, 20%. And that's going to hopefully make up the difference. That's really insightful. Something else that I wanted to bring up to you and get your thoughts on is where do you think the industry is from an HR standpoint in benefits compared to other industries? And where's the gap? Is dental like amazing and we give great benefits, or is there a little bit of a gap there and there's some things that we could work on?
I would love to say that. For the most part, I feel like we're behind in benefits. And I understand that insurance reimbursements haven't changed. You can raise your fees all you want, but if you're taking insurance, you don't have a lot of control over that. And so, when you're not in control of what actually you're bringing in your collections, it's hard to say, hey, I want to offer these, 5-star quality benefits. However, if you look at other industries, and even in healthcare, if you look at other private practices in healthcare, they're offering more, usually on the PTO and health insurance side. And depending on your workforce, you may or may not need to offer health insurance or want to offer health insurance. If nobody's going to take it, it would be nice. But, if you've got a younger workforce, for example, they're not as interested in health insurance right now, since there's not a mandate that's effective, and they're not as interested in 401k, whether they should be or not.
Yeah.
They aren't as interested in it. And so they're looking more for work-life balance. They're looking more for PTO. And that's something that I am still seeing practices that offer 0 paid time off in the first year, and then maybe a week after 1 year, or 2 weeks after 3, or something very, very low. And they can go so many other places and get 2 weeks of PTO starting on day 1, add another week after a year, add another couple weeks after 3 or 5 years.
And work from home too.
And work from home potentially in some of those industries. So yeah, dentistry doesn't have the flexibility to offer some of those types of perks that other industries offer. They can't have work from home unless it's maybe the front desk or somebody doing insurance billing. That is possible. But for the most part, you can't do dentistry from home. Yeah. So you're going to have your team come in. And so in order to try to work with that and compete with that, you're going to have to look at what your benefits package offers. Now, a lot of DSOs are a lot more flexible than smaller private practices. They obviously have a bigger budget. They can, command those better prices on health insurance. So it's easier for them to provide some of the more premium benefits to their teams. But even in DSOs, even in some larger practices, I've seen the amount of time off be a lot less than what it should be to be competitive in this market. Because like I said before, people are looking outside and they're seeing that there are other options. A lot of people are under the impression that, well, everybody wants to work a 9 to 5 and dentistry is great because you can work during the day. And it's like, yeah, but some people don't want that. If they've got kids at home right now, it's easier maybe if they work a night shift somewhere so their spouse can work during the day, and, they can tag team on taking care of kids instead of paying the extraordinary cost for childcare. So it's not this awesome golden package that it used to be, just having a 9 to 5. Some people don't want it. I'm one of those people, by the way.
Yeah. No, I totally hear you. I mean, as a company, we're working all the legal stuff out because of all the states, like I said, and that's where we're going through having to jump through loops, but we're going to a 980 schedule, working 9 days a week, 80 hours. So you get every other Friday off, and then adjusting our benefits and doing all those kind of creative things that we possibly can to help attract the best talent. And
it's hard to do that in dentistry because you need to have a consistent patient schedule.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was going to ask you. So being that you understand the restraints, right? Because someone from tech can walk in and say, we'll do it this way, right? And it doesn't work for dentistry. What would you, if you were going to build a plan for somebody and you were going to give them like 3 main things to do, what would be those 3 main things?
To retain talent, to attract talent?
All the above.
All of the above.
Benefits, just the benefit package that you're going to offer now to attract and retain the best talent. What would those 3 things be that you got to have these in there?
That's obviously going to vary by area. If you're going to be in a more rural location where you have less competition and I say less competition from other dental practices, just because you have less competition in dentistry doesn't mean you have less competition. Your front desk skills are transferable to many other industries. Yep. So, just because you're in a smaller location doesn't 100% mean you've got your people and locked in and they can't go anywhere. So the first thing I tell people to look at is the total rewards. What is your hourly? How many hours are they working? So what's their annual base salary? What does your benefits add up to be? What does it cost you in paid time off? What does it cost you in holidays, sick leave, if you separate that out? What expense are you paying for health insurance? And actually get that in some kind of number where you could literally, and I have some practices do this, they hand their employees a sheet at the end of the year saying, this is literally what your total rewards cost is. It's not just your hourly rate.
So just so we're clear, it's so your salary is going to be, I'm just going to use round numbers, $50,000, but we're giving you $20,000 in benefits.
Right. They actually spell this out. This is how much it costs us to pay in taxes and benefits and all of the things that go into this employee's total rewards package, not just their hourly rate. And I have a slide that I deliver in some of my business planning presentations about how an employee's salary is not just hourly rate. I'll get a lot of startup practices that'll say, oh yeah, it's, $15 an hour times 32 hours a week. I'm like, yes, but it's also all these other things that equal a good percentage higher than that. So do that first and actually see where you are in line with your market. You need to compare to your market, which is incredibly hard to do right now. Oh my goodness, you have no idea. It's insane. You're literally
why
going
is it hard to do just because everything's changing so fast?
Because the data from last year is what the Bureau of Labor Statistics will produce, which we all know is crap right now. It's difficult to get a really accurate assessment of what everybody's paying because people are having to go up so quickly or be so flexible, or maybe they're offering a sign-on bonus in addition to this, and you don't always see that. So you're literally scrolling through Indeed at this point in some cases saying this is what people are offering. For this position. Sometimes you're getting that information from job candidates. Well, this practice offered me this. What can you do for me? Okay. Whether they're being honest or not, that can take that with a grain of salt. But still, sometimes they'll give you that information, and you kind of find out that market value from there. There are surveys that are going around, but honestly, by the time they're completed and published, it'll probably have changed again.
Yeah. So total. So you can only do three things. You're going to help a DSO, or you're in charge of the HR for a DSO for attracting and retaining talent. Number one is total awards.
To look at your total awards. The second thing I would look at your culture in general. Look and see whether or not you're having trouble getting candidates in the door, or are you having trouble keeping them? I've had one practice I've spoken with lately that they have people leaving after 2 or 3 weeks, and they're at a loss for what they're doing. And I'm like, look at what your culture is. What are they coming into? Do you have some issues possibly in your management hierarchy with your practice administrators, or is it possibly with your associates or somebody else that's at the practice? Are they all coming from one location? Are they coming across the board? Is it all one city versus, the state or overall? So kind of look and see if you can pinpoint where the issues are. Because I want to say it's a Gallup survey from a couple of years ago that said, 70% of people leave jobs because of the manager, not because of pay, not because of benefits. They leave because of the manager. Especially this younger workforce and even the millennial workforce. They want to work for somebody who actually cares about them, work for somebody who is going to provide what they want and look at their goals and help grow and develop them, help them achieve the work-life balance that they want. They're not just there for a paycheck. Hopefully some are, I'm sure, I'm not generalizing any generation.
Yeah. So number one, total awards. Number two, make sure your culture's in line so you can retain them.
Yes.
And then what would number three be?
Number three, I think it kind of goes as a spinoff of culture, but looking at your onboarding process, your onboarding and recruiting process. Whenever you're attracting talent, are your recruiters, internal or otherwise, getting back to candidates? Are they giving them the information they want? Are they being upfront about the salary? Are they being upfront about maybe the schedule, for example? Are they bringing people in on day one, giving them 2 hours of orientation and then sticking them in the team without ever, having them tour the practice or meet the rest of the team? They're just expecting them to jump up and be productive. How are you really treating your candidates like part of the team and welcoming them to your culture? What are you doing? There's a couple of companies out there that will do like welcome packages, for example, where they give you all kinds of swag and make you feel like you are coming into an experience, coming into a culture, and that they really want you to be there. Yep. Versus like, oh, hey, it's the new guy. Are you giving them any kind of mentorship? Are you having them meet the people and have lunch with them that first day? What are you doing? And I talked to some DSO leaders and they're like, yeah, but we need people to work. And yes, you do. Yeah. But they're not going to be particularly productive after a 2-hour orientation and then just a couple hours of shadowing and hoping that they can start, picking up tools on day 2. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Not very well anyway.
I love the way you're thinking, because the total awards is breaking down the pay element of it. The culture is dealing with like the heartbeat of the company. How do people feel when they work there? And then the onboarding process is dealing with making sure that this person is successful right off the bat. So I think that's really great. And one of the things that you said about, and I wanted to ask you a clarifying question on this, because sometimes there's a lot of different opinions on this. You said this new generation of workforce that's coming in wants somebody to care about them. And I know that you don't say that in a way like the old generation or the generation before wants people not to care for them. But what's the difference that you're seeing, and how do you tackle that?
Yes, and I don't mean care about them as in we all need to have this family feel. I know in some of the smaller practices that is a thing, and it's great to feel like you can trust your team and have that really great connection with them. But I feel like there still needs to be some boundaries there. Another topic entirely, but anyway. So I don't mean it from that perspective, but they want somebody to care about them as an individual, as somebody who is growing in the practice. They want opportunities for development. They want, to have, like I said, that work-life balance where they don't feel like they're on call 24/7, where you got them with the Slack app on their phone and everybody's talking and barking out emails about things that went wrong at 11:30 at night. They want to feel like they've got a life outside of work. They are not there. They're not, working to or living to work. They're working to live. They're there for 32 hours a week. They shouldn't feel so drained at the end of the week because they're getting emails from managers at 10 o'clock at night or 6 a.m. or whatever. They want to feel like they actually can trust you is another thing. They want to feel like that you're looking out for them and they're looking out for you. That psychological contract that comes from the employee-employer relationship, that they want and expect certain things from you and you want and expect certain things from them. You expect them to show up, they expect a paycheck, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is so good. So if someone came to you, right, and they said, okay, well, I'm doing all those things, it's all wrong. We're messaging all night and I know people are burnt out. I know that I'm doing these things wrong. How do they fix that? Is that something that you help them with, or is that something that you point them in another direction? Like what would you do if someone came to you with those exact problems?
Oh, absolutely. The first thing I would do is I would actually survey their team. I do a Workforce 360 where I'll go in and interview either some key team members, or we can send out a survey and actually kind of figure out, put some numbers to it. What percentage of employees are feeling burned out on XYZ? I'll talk with the practice leaders and get what they want to know. And then I'll put in what I want to know and create a report from there and say, this is really what's going on. You think you know what your problem is, and sometimes you just don't. Sometimes your employees are not going to tell the person who signs their paycheck what's really wrong. And if you look at exit interview rates right now, people don't want to do them. They don't want to say. They're out of there and they're gone. An exit interview is something you should be anyways conducting before somebody leaves, regardless of how they're separating. Although if it's a bad termination, they're probably not going to be super inclined to do that. But if they're just leaving for another job, get some information. What can you do better? And past that exit interview, conduct stay interviews. While they're still there to hopefully keep them there, and use your performance review time, for example, to be finding out what you could be doing better for them, not just how they could be improving. So there's a lot of ways to get information from employees, but one of the best ways is to have a third party come in and do it, because they're more likely to feel like it's anonymous, that they can be open. And yeah, you wouldn't believe the things people will tell me.
So, and you said exit interview data is kind of telling us some things. What are you looking at there, and how does that look? I haven't seen anything on that.
Whenever people are sending out exit interviews, a lot of them are not getting completed. They're just being completely ignored. Sometimes they send it out as a survey format versus an actual in-person conversation. So I've been hearing so many stories about them just getting completely ignored. Or if they are, getting filled out, it's because pay. Usually they feel disgruntled because new team members got brought on and they're getting paid more.
So I've been here for 20 years and I make 40, and you brought on a new person and they're making 50.
Yeah. The practices that don't offer raises at all, ever, of any kind. Yeah. Those types of things that have been going on that, it just kind of depends on your practice and how you want to operate, but there's going to be pros and cons to it. And if you want to keep your pay flat for 5 years, well, you're probably going to have more turnover.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful. And then something, changing gears on you just a little bit, you said, I like the way you break down required versus best practices from an HR standpoint. Can you walk us through that?
So oftentimes I'll get asked whether somebody has to do something because there's actually a law about it or because it's just a best practice. And so typically when I deal with employee relations issues, whenever it concerns a federal state mandate, and, not being an attorney myself, I'm an HR consultant, but not an attorney. I still say employment law falls into a couple different categories. There's the things that you have to do, the things that you cannot do. And then there's this gray area where I call the best practices, the things you can do, but probably shouldn't. For example, I have somebody who has an employee who's out testing for COVID right now. And during the testing time, they're basically sitting there not earning any money. and they have asked if, there's a way that they could get PTO fronted. Well, you don't have to do that. Of course not. But why not? This employee has been there for several years. You want to keep this employee. You're the one that sent them for testing. So could you potentially front them some PTO? Yes. Would you do it in most circumstances if it were like vacation or something? No, probably not. But for COVID testing, yeah, I would.
Yeah, because they're gonna be gone anyways, right?
Yeah. Potentially.
I love that. So. I love the way you frame that up. And then, what's one of the biggest myths that you're dealing with right now that you're just seeing that people are doing over and over and over again, and it's just not the actual case?
Ooh, there's a lot. Probation periods where they feel like they can terminate people for any reason and they won't have to pay unemployment for them. Working interviews where they think they can just cut a check or pay with a gift card without getting any documentation. That's some of them. It usually ends up being around paying people. We talked about some earlier, the at-will versus the, let's see. Oh, another one is bonuses. That was another one that I think that people don't understand quite a bit, that I see them getting wrong a lot. Discretionary versus non-discretionary bonuses. See, I tell you, all this stuff revolves around paying people for the most part. Discretionary bonuses are ones that you give just because. So if you want to just because give team, into your bonus with no actual metrics to it, that's a discretionary bonus. Most of the other ones that you're seeing in dentistry are non-discretionary bonuses. And that means that they have some kind of a formula that they're going to achieve it. And yeah, it's at your discretion whether you want to offer a bonus, but you're giving them metrics and a way to achieve that bonus. That's a non-discretionary bonus. Mm-hmm. So the thing about that is if your employees are non-exempt, and you should know whether they are or not, for the most part, the only exempt positions are going to be your associates, maybe your hygienists, and your practice administrators who are actually managing people, not just, answering phones and making the schedules and whatnot. For the non-exempt employees, you actually have to pay an overtime premium on that. So if they've worked any overtime in whatever that bonus period is, you're supposed to be giving them that overtime time and a half premium for any hours worked over 40 in that period, or over in the 1 week period for any of those. So if it's like a monthly bonus and they worked 5 hours of overtime over the month, you're supposed to actually do time and a half of that bonus for that 5 hour.
Wow.
And nobody does that. And I have actually had a client get a DOL audit, and that was the one thing that they found.
Yeah. And so, that's, it's complicated, right? Like you have to really have somebody that knows what they're doing, understands dental, right? Cause you have to understand all the metrics in dental and why we're bonusing people.
Understands dental, understands the financial side, and understands the actual employment laws that go with it.
Mm-hmm. Fun.
Yeah.
What's one of the things that right now, if you were put you in charge of a DSO and you're heading up HR, what's something that you would radically change and just do differently than everybody else?
I would probably give your frontline managers, your office managers, actual HR training, and let them know, all of these things that have to be followed. Because when you get into a DSO, you're going to be over 50 people most likely, right? And so FMLA is likely going to apply, for example. And I would provide that kind of training with them. I would provide actual leadership training for those frontline office managers, because they're the ones that are actually dealing with the non-exempt employees, with the people who are dealing with your patients. So while some DSOs may have an HR department that handles a lot of things, I would really push down that training, and make sure that everybody is really aware, and not just we give them a 2-hour webinar once a year kind of aware, like actually take them off site for a retreat and train them for a couple of days
not a training. A lot of the training is just so you're not liable, right? So it's just like, hey, we told you. We're not, you can't sue us now, or someone can't sue us now.
Like the sexual harassment trainings. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so, hey, we did the training that you told us to do, so we're not liable anymore. You're not talking about that kind of training. I'm talking about like actual, this is what ADA is. And I don't mean the American Dental Association. I mean the Americans with Disabilities Act. And these are some situations that employees may come to you, and you're going to need to, work with them on an accommodation. You do still need to loop in HR or legal or both, depending on the situation. However, I want you to be able to recognize when is the time to do that. Need you to recognize when somebody might be eligible for FMLA without having to go, dig it out of a file somewhere, or think, oh yeah, I had some training about that 5 years ago. I think HR said that about that one time about that one person. Yeah.
So those kinds of things, I would really push that kind of training toward the people who need it the most, the ones who have either been a clinical or front desk person and got promoted to an office manager, who don't really have that formal training, is often the case anyway.
Yeah.
Make sure that they have that understanding.
And do you do that kind of training? Is that something that you offer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's
Okay.
one of my favorite things to do.
Cool. So will you walk me through that? So I have 50 locations. I have regional managers. I have office managers, and I know I need some support around HR. Walk me through how you would train my people and how that would look and feel.
We would likely set up a retreat or a couple of different meetings. It could be virtually or otherwise, where I would come in and I would do some presentations and some workshop style training with those team members, to where I'd give them, situational judgment questions and scenarios, and have them actually work through those types of things, and hopefully provide that hands-on education and make them feel not just aware of what's going on, but confident knowing that they can handle those situations.
Got it. So is that done in like a group setting? Is it?
Yeah, usually. A lot of people are very, very tired of virtual learning. They're tired of being told just to watch a bunch of videos. They check out at the end of watching a bunch of videos. And so while I have considered and have thought about, like, to the point where I have some of the material down and maybe end up launching a course on it anyway, I really feel like it's best whenever it's delivered in kind of a hands-on live environment. And it can still be done virtually, but it needs to be interactive, where they're actually, forced to pay attention and learn and engage. And I think the retention is a lot better there.
The point is not just for to cover our rear end, so to speak, right? We want them to truly be engaged and to be actively wanting to learn these things.
There's a much greater impact whenever your managers know how to handle certain situations. And hopefully that has a wider spread impact of reducing turnover, for example, making it a place that people want to work. Making it a place where people want to bring their friends to come and work. Your hygienists are in all of these groups. Your dental assistants are in all of these groups. They have all this network of people that do the same thing they do, and they talk and they know what everybody's making and what the culture is at different practices. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Got it. And then, okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. So one thing that you think dental just needs to fundamentally change to fix some of the recruiting issues that we're seeing?
Whether the training needs to be the thing that fixes the recruiting issues that we're seeing?
No, I'm sorry. I'm changing gears on you here. So
okay.
I apologize. So right now in dentistry, what's something that you just think that universally needs to be rethought about in the dental industry to help us with some of the woes that we're facing in recruiting right now?
I think benefits are going to be one of your number one things. I think that you're going to have to figure out a way to make yourself more competitive. And again, I understand, especially with PPO practices, that you are dealing with, less reimbursement, depending on which insurances you're taking, lower reimbursements than you have in the past. And I understand that supply costs are higher. I get that. However, I think at this point, you can't afford not to. I feel like the amount of productivity you're losing by not having certain positions filled on your team, I think the burnout that creates on your other team members and makes them want to leave. And I think that just in general, the cost of turnover, the cost of recruiting and bringing somebody on and training them and then having them leave before, 6 months or a year or 2 years, and you're having to stop and do it all again. The stats on that are extraordinarily high. I want to say it was Gallup as well that put out 33% of the first year's annual salary is what the cost of turnover is for each percent. I would be a little bit more conservative in dentistry because y'all are likely not, hiring in-house recruiters. You don't necessarily have headhunters for every position. You're putting posts on Indeed and dental posts on Facebook. And so that side of things isn't going to cost you as much. But even if you took it at 20%, how much does that cost you? I did that math for one of my corporate practices recently, just based on some rough conservative numbers. And we came up with something like $182,000 that they had lost in turnover in the last year, where they could have maybe taken 50,000 of that and provided more benefits and reduced that number significantly.
How big were they? Like roughly how many? Was it a single practice?
9 or 10. It's now a 10 location practice, but it was 9 at the time.
Wow. Okay. And then I was same question for retention. So one thing that dentistry just needs to rethink, is it again benefits, the same thing?
I would think so, benefits, but then just culture and mindset. This employer mindset, some practices are great. Some dentists are fantastic at being leaders. They are just people, and their teams love them. I have many clients like that, and they're just my favorite people to work with. It's one of the reasons I love working with dentists. But I also hear and get on Facebook and some of these groups, and I see some of the conversations that people have and the comments that are made about their team. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that carries over to your team. Those negative thoughts that you have are going to be perceived by your team, whether you think that or not. That, unconscious bias you may have for your team, or just whatever disdain you have, it will carry through in your day-to-day interactions, and it will bring your culture down. Culture is a top-down concept. You can't have your culture shift happen at the bottom level. It has to come from the top. Yep. So if it's a DSO, your C-suite has to be on board with this positive culture that they want to drive forward. If it's a smaller practice, it definitely needs to be the dentist or the spouse that works there, the office manager, whoever the leadership team is, needs to be on board with that. And that needs to be a significant part of your employer brand, is a positive, welcoming culture for your team. I really just feel like that is something that needs to shift. If it hasn't started already, it's definitely going to need to, because I just see so many practices that are struggling. And I look at some of the comments and I'm thinking, well, yes, that's why.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think it's fair to measure culture by turnover? To say, you know what, your culture is not good because you're losing this many people?
It's not the only element, but it is certainly a metric that you should be looking at whenever you're looking at your KPI dashboard. You need to look at your turnover percentage. Especially for the larger practices. If you only have 10 employees and you lose one in a year, my gosh, that's a disastrous turnover percentage. But, if you're a DSO with a couple hundred employees, then that certainly needs to be a metric that gets measured.
Got it. What other metrics are you looking at for culture to see if you're winning or losing?
Employee satisfaction. You can conduct surveys. I usually recommend doing at least twice a year, if not quarterly, and measure your actual employees' responses to what what they feel their benefits are, how they feel that their management is, how they feel their work is.
Got it. And then what's a good EPNS score? What would you say would something that's good there? Do you help with that? Is that something that you have like an idea of range on?
Yeah, I mean, you really want it to be over 90%. You'd love it to be 100%, but let's be realistic here. You'd like it to be over 90% of employees satisfied with their job.
Got it.
And then for the ones that aren't, you'd like to drill down and find out why.
Yeah, that's great. And then last question for you. I want to know, what is your favorite marketing campaign of all time? What is something that maybe when you were younger, or something that you watched on TV, something that really stuck with you, impacted you, and really changed the way you did things, or even your buying habits?
Oh, goodness. Let me see. I don't even know. I don't watch a lot of commercials or marketing or anything like that. So, yikes, that's a hard question. My goodness.
What kind of coffee do you
What's
drink?
yours? Just curious. Now that you asked me, I'm wondering what yours is.
Mine, I have a couple. So there was when I was a kid, Nike was huge. All of the commercials with Nike, I literally thought I could jump higher and run faster, and I really, really believed that. And I was willing to do whatever it took to save up. When I was younger, it was probably about $160 to $180 for a pair of shoes, and I know, right? And because they had that swoosh on them, that was a no-brainer, right? Like those were definitely going to help me perform at a higher level. So that was
absolutely,
that was probably the biggest impact. What kind of coffee do you drink? Like what brand?
Stoke cold brew.
Stokes. Yeah.
Stoke cold brew.
How did they get you?
One of my favorite kinds.
How did you get in and hear about them and start using them?
I am a researcher, so I was actually researching cold brew brands because I was trying to find one that wasn't bitter. Because I actually don't love like Starbucks cold brew, for example. Yeah. It's a little bit bitter. So I actually did a search for coffees that weren't, and I tried a couple, and that was the one that I liked. I will say I do like their branding on the side. They're a very nerdy company, so that kind of works for me.
There you go. So they got you. That's your favorite. We'll put that down as your favorite marketing campaign.
There we go. That works.
Awesome. Well, these were some great insight and tips that you gave today. I think they'll be super valuable. And I really, really appreciate you coming on today and spending this time to help everybody with all the coming HR problems that we're facing, and that even how to start planning for the future.
No, absolutely. And I loved being here because I know y'all do a lot of work with practices with employer branding, and on that employee recruiting and onboarding, that whole package, all of that culture is part of your employer brand. And I think that y'all have a huge impact with these practices that can really help, even in the space that, is the HR space. I think that's a really great collaboration to think about, a marketing and an HR team working together to build that employer brand and attract quality candidates.
Absolutely.
So I was really excited when you asked.
That's
Thank
awesome. Thank you so much. Last thing, share with everybody how can they find you? If someone goes, man, I want help, I want coaching, I want to learn more about your services, how can they reach you?
clinicalhr.com. My email is kara@clinicalhr.com. Or you're welcome to call my cell. Quite honestly, I give my cell out to just about everybody. It's 512-876-4866.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You have a good day.